All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the fifth and final installment of the Blessed Order, in which we look at the Orthodox Christian understanding of anthropology, the understanding of the person of man, human beings. Before we delve into tonight's topic, I would like to ask if there are questions related to last week's topic, which was femininity, any questions related to that whatsoever, or anything related to something further back.
Totally non-controversial.
Yeah. Yes. Head coverings. Yeah, you had to zero in on the controversial thing. Yes, head coverings. What's this all about? St. Paul says that it is necessary for a woman to have her head covered, her hair covered. It says if she will not be covered, let her be shorn. In the manner of the temple prostitutes, and because we know that that is shameful, well, we're not going to do that. So let's keep the hair covered. And he makes the curious statement on account of the angels, because of the angels. What is this all about exactly? It's actually good that you're asking this question in an adult class, that is, there are no children around, because it's not really a kid-friendly response. The short of it is that in the ancient world, in pagan culture and Jewish culture, in all the cultures, it was an interesting feature, the understanding of a woman's hair. It was believed to be a part of her reproductive organs. That is indeed a part of her reproductive system. And because of this, it is not something that would that anyone would really be comfortable kind of just sharing with anyone, sharing with the world, and so the apostle is concerned with good order. He's concerned with modesty, but it does relate to this particularly. The comment, because of the angels. This is an interesting one, but it actually it refers to the fall of angels, particularly through the Nephilim ritual, in which we see in Genesis the sons of God went into saw that the daughters of men, that they were fair, and went into them and took wives of them. This is there is this understanding that through human evil, through human desire to gain greater power for themselves, that this leads some of the angels indeed to fall, and that we don't want to have any of this. We don't want to have any of this way of thinking with us present in the church. That in the church we are concerned with restoring the blessed order to creation. Okay, not with keeping things muddied up. Not with kind of going forward in certain in certain manners and backwards in others. But as always, advancing the blessed order of Yahweh wherever we go. And so it's kind of a tightening up of the screws, as it were. Does that answer your question?
No.
Okay. Yeah, not controversial at all. Okay, other questions? All right. Well, I guess we got the really big controversial one out of the way, and so none of the rest of the class is going to be controversial at all. Marriage. Yes, is what brings us together today. So I'm not going to do the voice. This is being recorded. Okay, this is going to be on YouTube. Okay, so sorry, I'm not doing the voice. Yes, tonight we are talking about marriage. Erunt duo in carne una. And the two shall become one flesh. What is marriage? What is the meaning of marriage within this blessed order which Yahweh has created? We've been over the fact that the Lord has created human beings, male and female. That he has created them in his image. That is, that his creatures look like him. That his creatures are constituted of soul and body together. Now, we go to this first human relationship which God has made. I want us to think about this for a minute. The very first human relationship which God creates is a marriage. And that marriage consists in the union of one man and one woman. Far from being culturally defined, marriage is divinely defined as the union between one man and one woman. And this human relationship is directly connected to the role that the man and the woman are going to play in creation. How they are going to combine their masculine and feminine powers here in the blessed order. How this is going to come about. I apologize, my allergies. Their relationship, as I said, is tied to their calling. The man and the woman are given, in the first chapter of Genesis, a great commission. We commonly think of the Great Commission as happening at the tail end of Matthew 28, yes? Mm-hmm. But it is not the first time a Great Commission has been given. And this commission which the man and the woman have been given is not dissimilar to the Great Commission which the Lord Jesus Christ gives to his apostles. But in the context of their relationship, this marriage, which God has ordained, he charges them to be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it. What is the meaning of this Great Commission? That the man and the woman, through sex and procreation, are to multiply, and in multiplying, they are to fill the earth with their children. They are to, with their children, subdue the earth. That is, bring the earth in subjection to the rule of God. They are tasked with taking the blessed order which exists in Eden out to the rest of creation. That is what they are charged with. And that charge is directly related to their relationship. This cannot happen if they do not procreate. It won't happen if they don't procreate. They must have sex. They must have babies. This is the means by which the earth will be filled. So marriage is intended to be the means by which the human race is advanced. The means by which we grow. Marriage is the framework in which the work of having children happens. Okay, now, before I go further, I'm going to pause. Questions about this? Yes, sir.
I've heard that some church fathers have said that the means by which Adam and Eve reproduced prior to the fall would not have been what we now call sexual reproduction. But presumably what you're saying is that even prior to the fall, reproduction of some kind was
absolutely implied. Yeah, and granted, this is not a universally shared opinion. This is a theologumenon, a theological opinion of a couple of fathers that, oh no, the mechanics would have been totally different. I'm very much disinclined in that generation, in that direction. Sorry, I don't believe that's the case. You know, the bodies that the man and the woman receive, after the fall, these garments of skin, they are different in that they are mortal. They are corruptible. Okay, the distinction is not made that they're also different and they do this really gross thing. It's that distinction is not made within the text. And because of that, I just kind of leave that opinion. That opinion is fine. I don't share it, but it's fine. We can't go in the way back and see. So, yes, ma'am.
I have two questions.
Yes, ma'am.
My first question, I know there's an opinion out there among the fathers that not all the fathers share, that in Genesis when it says, Adam and Eve were given coats of skin, that meant they were given the bodies like skin.
Yes, ma'am.
What do you think about that opinion? Because you implied this now, do you agree with that?
Oh, this is depicted iconographically. We've seen icons of this, of the expulsion from paradise, and you see Adam and Eve kind of wearing animal skins. And really, I mean, yeah, how else are you going to depict that iconographically? You can't really, are you going to kind of like in one frame show like these clear bodies or whatever, and then kind of these opaque ones? How do you do that? I think the way that it's been handed down to us through our iconographic tradition is probably the best way to kind of depict that reality. But we do know that, yeah, the garments of skin that Yahweh gives to the man and the woman are new bodies which can break down. That is, they will, with the passage of time, wear out. Now is that specifically because there's skin on the outside and maybe there wasn't before? I don't know that I could say that really. St. Paul, has mentioned that that Adam was a spiritual man. At first, God breathed into his face and he became a living soul. And so while some have kind of speculated as to kind of what this pre-fall body, kind of in what it consisted, we can't we can't really say. We can say that what is distinct about the new body is that it is subject to mortality. So is that helpful at all?
Yes.
Okay.
My other question was, you said that the purpose of marriage is to fill the earth outside of Eden and subdue it.
Yes, ma'am.
So what would the purpose of marriage have been before the fall?
Before the fall. This is the purpose of marriage before the fall.
Before the fall, and we were in Eden, not in the rest of the world, so there was no
Right.
opportunity to subdue the rest of the world to the will of God.
Right. They are. The understanding is that the man and the woman begin in Eden, and not that they are to be expelled from it. It's always supposed to be home or home base as such, but that they are charged with going beyond it, and expanding in that way. That is, going beyond Eden and taking the blessed order elsewhere, if that makes sense.
Then why would it make sense for God to expel them from Eden and basically take away their home base? Mm-hmm. Wouldn't that just make it harder for them to fulfill it?
Well, because they've determined by their action, by their lack of repentance, that they're not interested in carrying out God's work, and God's not going to force them to do His work, anyway. They are charged. They had been charged with, taking the blessed order out into the world, but because they have cut themselves off effectively from the source of blessedness, God tells them that they're going to go out there, but but it's going to be different. That is, the elements which they were supposed to conquer, nature itself, which they were to subdue, it is going to be hostile to them, and they're not really going to have the means to subdue it. They're going to lack grace. They're going to lack the presence of God. They're not going to have the ability to bring the natural order into subjection to God. This is why God tells Adam, no longer will he be picking fruit from the trees. Now you're going to have to till the earth. You're going to have to till the earth. Now it's going to be hard. Okay, it can be done, but it's going to be hard. He says, "In the sweat of your face will you eat your bread." And so the natural order will remain untamed. It will remain wild. It will remain hostile to them, and as such, they won't be spreading God's blessed order anywhere. They will only be multiplying, and that's it.
So now it's impossible to completely fulfill His commandments.
No, but we'll get to that. We'll get to that. But those are very good questions. Yes, ma'am.
Weren't they also expelled from the garden to keep them away from the tree?
To keep them from the tree of life, lest they stretch their hand out and eat it and live forever in that twisted, sinful state. It's actually a protection, for them, that so that they will not live forever and ever as the serpent who tempted them and fell. He will be twisted and warped by his sin for all eternity. He can't turn back. Yahweh doesn't want that for his image bearers. So he gives them a way out. And that way out is mortality. So, yes, ma'am.
So before the fall, they were immortal and they were eating the tree of life, and it was only afterwards that they were expelled to the cleanse?
There are a couple of lines of thought on this. There's the one that they were immortal. In the West, you get the idea of natural immortality, which we know is not a thing. Only God is naturally immortal. The other is that they were neither immortal nor mortal, that their destiny was intermediate. By the phrase, lest they stretch out their hand to the tree of life and live forever, would seem to indicate that they have not yet partaken of it. And so as such, their destiny was not completely determined. Saint Irenaeus of Lyon points out rather masterfully how the man and the woman are like little children. He doesn't say that they are little children. He says they are like little children in their understanding. That their understanding is imperfect. Okay, that they are gullible. They can be duped. They have a lot to learn. This is why Yahweh doesn't simply give them the tree of the knowledge of good and evil like that. It's in the garden. He does want them to have it, but not just yet. Because they're not mature enough to handle what it's going to give them, the knowledge of good and evil. He would like for them to first learn loving obedience, and then when they have learned that, then give it to them. But we see that's not what happened. And here we are. So, but yes, does that help, dear? Okay, very good. We had another question here, Mr. Dale.
Well, I was just saying, we're kind of deviating a little bit from that. When they were created in the garden, one man and one woman,
Yes, sir.
it was strictly a monogamous situation.
Yes, sir.
And by the time of Christ, the Jews, again, were a monogamous society.
Yes, sir.
But somewhere in between,
Right.
they had wives and concubines, and when did that start and why, and when did it stop and why?
The first evidence we see of sexual immorality that is, named in a person is in Lamech, the descendant of Cain, who has 2 wives. Okay, the entire line of Cain is understood as being accursed. That is, of each successive generation being worse than the one that came before it. And so we see with Lamech the practice of polygamy. Okay, it's very, very, very important to remember that just because the Bible mentions something does not mean that the Bible is endorsing it. Okay, all right. Yahweh never puts his stamp of approval on polygamy or concubinage. He never says that's okay. He never, that is never the case. And in fact, the stories that we see, the stories in which we see characters who are polygamist, Abraham functionally, or Jacob, or then David, then Solomon, we actually see problems that come about as a direct result of that. Okay?
And it's worse with Solomon, I guess.
Oh yes, yeah, no, it's absolutely the worst with Solomon, because Solomon marries or makes a concubine of any woman he sees and likes, and it leads him, far astray from Yahweh. The practice itself it leads people away from Yahweh.
And then when did that get condemned and ended?
Interestingly enough, in the Jewish world, it continues. Polygamy it actually does exist at the time of Christ. And it doesn't really end within the Jewish world until about the 10th or 11th century A.D. Okay? So, men were taking multiple wives, until about 1,000 years ago.
I didn't know that.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It was the Christians who were taking one. And that was it.
Yeah.
All right. See, I knew there would be questions. All right. Yes, ma'am.
Is there anywhere in the Jewish law that mentions polygamy?
You mean like the law of Moses proper, or like Talmudic commentary? No, ma'am. Polygamy is not touched on. There are things pertaining to marriage, but there's never, well, you do this with your second wife and with your third wife, and it's like, no, the expectation is that that is not, in fact, a thing.
Nowhere says precisely that you may only have one.
It does not say that. Yeah, it does not say that. There are quite a few things that it does not say explicitly, and yet there's an expectation that, okay, guys, really? But again, people are people, so, well, you didn't say. So, all right. Okay, so we see that the relationship that the man and the woman are put into is directly tied to their vocation. Their vocation in in sharing in the work of Yahweh, expanding His blessed order. This is supremely important for us to understand, because the nature of marriage, as we understand it in the Orthodox Church, has not changed. With the coming of the Lord Jesus Christ, we could say the purpose has changed slightly, but not fundamentally that what marriage has changed at all. Okay? The man and the woman are entrusted with sexual intercourse. Within sexual intercourse is the very engine of creation itself. Something that was looked upon in all ancient cultures, regardless of which gods they worshipped, was looked upon as awe-inspiring, a gift. Maybe from the gods, maybe from something greater than the gods. But the ability to make another human being was looked upon as truly wonderful. And likewise, within marriage, the inability to produce offspring was looked upon as a curse. Because, well, you're married, you're having sexual intercourse, and there are no children. What's going on? Something's not right. Something needs to be fixed. But you are, but if that is your case, if you're living with barrenness, then there's a curse of some kind that is upon you. And we remember that accursed is simply not existing as one is meant to exist. You know, there is something wrong. We will see in the scriptures how there is a degradation of this understanding of marriage and the purpose of marriage with the passage of time, as men get further and further away from God. So I mentioned already the character of Lamech, okay, the first polygamist. All right, this is I would say some of the first evidence of what we would call sexual immorality in the Old Testament. Okay? Now, I use those words, sexual immorality. There are Christian people who nod their heads in agreement, saying, yes, that is indeed a thing. And there are other people who look upon that and say, oh, those prudish Christians, they hate sex, they hate fun, they hate everything, they ruin everything. Of course, we know that this is not the case. When we say sexual immorality, we're talking about sex being used in a way not consonant with its context. Okay, that is, the context for sexual intercourse is the union of a man and a woman. Okay, this is how it is to be used. When we see Lamech taking an additional wife, while he indeed is producing multiple children with them, there has been a rupture in God's plan for mankind. I want us to think about this, for a moment. The man and the woman. It is significant that it is one man and one woman, not one man and 3 women, or one man and 16 women, or one man and 1,000 women. Okay, or a woman and 1,500 men, or 2 men, 2 women, a man and a goat. Sorry, but this is, we have to consider this. What do we see in the partnership that Yahweh has set up? Well, one, that it is a partnership, okay? One and one, okay? These two creatures who are his image bearers, who are charged with spreading his blessed order within the world, and they are equal partners. Now, they are equal partners, and I've mentioned this before, but it's worth mentioning again, that between a man and a woman is a vast chasm of unknowing, that is, of lack of understanding. It's simply the case that men do not understand women. And likewise, women do not understand men. We don't get each other. And what's more, we can't. As much as we might try, or as much as we think we're trying. But it's just not going to happen. Now, this is really okay. We see in the charge that Yahweh has given to the man and the woman that it's okay that the man and the woman do not understand one another. At no point does he say that they need to. Never comes up. But Adam's exclamation, "This is truly flesh of my flesh and bone of my bones." That is, this creature is most beloved to me more than anything else. I'll have one too. No, I'm kidding. This is flesh of my flesh, this is bone of my bone. This expression of love. That we are to love in spite of not understanding. This is what the man and the woman are called to. Now, let's insert another woman into the picture. Is that same dynamic going to work? Because even if the women somehow accept each other's presence, well, the other is always a competitor. And there's always going to be that strife. There's always going to be that friction. We see this particularly in the case of Jacob, the infighting between Leah and Rachel, and the competition to have more children. Here, have my maidservant, to which he gets 2 additional wives. It's not good. It introduces strife. Even though there is childbearing and child rearing, there is always strife. And there is never the understanding that this is a partnership of any kind. This is really almost a monarchical headship of the man, with the wives as his subjects. Now, we see, excuse me, we see after the lineage of Cain, the mention of the time where the sons of God came to the daughters of men, found that they were fair, and took wives to themselves from among the daughters of men. Okay, I have mentioned this before, even if not in this class, that this is a reference to the Nephilim ritual, which is which, you know, we're getting away from polygamy. Even we're getting away from, you know, marriage, and we have gone just to fornication, but fornication in this case for magical purposes. Because within the Nephilim ritual, the king makes a sacrifice to the deity, is then possessed by the deity, and then goes and fornicates with the temple prostitute, who then bears a child who is understood to have two fathers. You know, the king and the god who possessed the king. A lot of times the king is thought of as being a god himself even. So sometimes they would say the child is 2/3 divine, 1/3 human. Okay, that is a heinous abuse of the gift of sex to the man and the woman in the context of marriage. This invites the element of the demonic. Because of the wickedness of the giants and the manner in which they serve their gods, which is by human sacrifice. We remember sacrifice is a meal shared with a deity, so the god gets his part and the people get theirs. So they're eating people. This is the violence that fills the earth, the wickedness that fills the earth in the time before the flood. This is what precipitates the flood. The text does say there were giants in those days and afterwards. So the phenomenon gets reconstituted even after the flood. We see a further misuse of sexual intercourse, particularly in the men of Sodom, where here we see men who burn with sexual passion for one another. We see that it is rampant through the city, that Lot and his family live on the edge of the city, and yet it says that every man of the city was surrounding the house. Every man. And that it is for the wickedness of the men of Sodom and Gomorrah that the two cities are utterly destroyed. Now here is a commentary regarding kind of the degrees of sexual sin. We remember that St. Paul says about sexual sin that it is unlike any other kind of sin. Why? Because it is a sin against your own body. Every other sin is done without the body. Sexual sin is a sin against the body itself. That is, that which constitutes you. It is a sin against that. Now, there are people who kind of, wonder at the difference within the realm of sexual immorality. Isn't it all, isn't it all bad? Isn't it all just as bad? What is the case here? Well, there are, I would say, degrees here. And it's the difference between one set of practices being disordered and another set of practices being what we would call fundamentally disordered. Right? That is fornication, adultery, polygamy. Any of those things, even though those things are wrong, a rite can be made out of them. Okay, the fornicating couple can marry and set it aright. The polygamous man can return to his first wife. That sort of thing. In what is called the union of two men or two women, this is fundamentally disordered. This can never yield anything that is good. Life is not going to come about in the union of two men or the union of two women. It's not going to happen. It is fundamentally disordered. That is, it is out of step with that order which Yahweh has instituted. As such, it cannot be blessed. Blessing it would mean to dissolve any such union and to repent. All right, I'm going to pause there. Questions? Was that clear?
Yeah.
Cool. See someone thinking about one.
I was thinking it was not an acceptable thing for Abraham just to take another wife.
No.
That was not acceptable.
No, sir. Yeah, it was not okay. It was not. Excuse me. It was not okay for Abraham to take another wife in the person of Hagar, the Egyptian, nor indeed in the person of his concubine, and the sons that he has by her. It's not okay. It's not acceptable. What is acceptable is the child which comes about as a result of the union with his wife. Yes, ma'am.
So, there's the whole thing about God not preventing evil from happening in the world for the sake of our free will.
Yes, ma'am.
Why then would he destroy Sodom and Gomorrah when it was their own free will and choices that made them evil?
Yes, that's an excellent question. What we're dealing with there is the the phenomenon of what has been called death by holiness. And to kind of explain, the nations which form in the aftermath of the Tower of Babel incident. The nations are given into the charge of the angels, of angels at first, 70 or 72, whichever text you're using, and these angels eventually fall, being worshipped as gods by their people, and them receiving that worship as such. God, as such, does not punish the nations, in terms of, if we're to think of punishment as chastisement for the sake of correction. What he does simply is, and this is the language that's used, he lets the cup of their iniquity get full. And then when it's full, he simply pours it out on them. That is, if they come to a point where, they are just abominably wicked and the innocent are endlessly suffering, he comes and destroys the nation. So he has not impeded their free will at all, but left to their devices, making the societal choices that they had made, neither was he going to allow their way of life to be a source of harm to others around them, as it was clearly going to be the case for Lot and his family. The two angels go to stay with him, and every man of Sodom wants to rape him. The angels. That's not okay.
So why does he not do the same for some places in the world today?
Excellent question. In that particular instance, Yahweh does not have a people. Okay? He has a person. He has Abraham. That's all he has. In times after, when he has a people, whether the people of Israel, old Israel, or newly constituted Israel, the church. The church, the people of Yahweh are charged with, again, spreading his rule throughout the world, spreading the blessed order. That's what the people of Yahweh are charged with. Okay? And when the people of Yahweh do this, this is a source of blessing to people. We saw that in the Eastern Roman Empire, by the 7th century AD, slavery just fell into disuse. There was no law outlawing it. There's no Emancipation Proclamation. There's no Civil War. Nothing like that. It just falls into disuse. How did that happen exactly? Well, it happened because of the preaching of the bishops and the priests consistently that, these slaves who you own, who you're bringing to church, they are just of just as much value as you. And if you treat them badly, you are going to burn in hell for eternity. Centuries of that preaching led even the most occasional churchgoer, you know, the Creaster, the Christmas and Easter crowd only, it led them to change their minds on the subject. That, you know what, I really don't have the right to own another human being. Okay? That is something very good that came about as a result of Yahweh's people doing what they're supposed to do. And then there are the instances in which Yahweh's people aren't doing anything at all. How else do you explain Hitler? If there were devoted Christians, okay, people, enough devoted Christians, who loved Christ and as such loved their neighbors as they loved themselves. If there had been enough of them, there's no way Hitler could have done any of the things that he did. But because their hearts were cold and mostly indifferent, the sons of the devil had their way. Does that make sense? Okay. Yes, sir.
So, sexual immorality is what is contrary to God's blessed order for marriage.
Yes, sir.
Or his order for procreation. And so, for that, there's the different degrees that you mentioned of, sins that can be sort of corrected in a way, or relationships that can be corrected.
Yes, sir.
And then relationships that, are messed up from the beginning.
Right.
But even I had seen, well, also this would include, for example, forgive me, like that one passage, I forgot who it was, but basically the spilling of the seed, or
oh, the case of Onan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also even some old texts about Epitimias, there's multiple times harsher consequences for sodomy within a relationship between a man and a woman versus man and man kind of thing. So it's like everything that is perverse compared to the purpose of allowing for creation of children.
Mm-hmm.
Am I correct?
Yeah, you're generally on the right path. The sin of Onan is that he has no charity for his brother. His brother is not going to be remembered at all. His memory is going to be blotted out from the face of the earth if he leaves no legacy. It is Onan's duty to raise up children for his brother's sake. Onan doesn't want to do this. He doesn't want to, he doesn't love his brother enough to be concerned with his legacy. He's fine with the sex, but he's not fine with the children part. And so Onan is really slain for his grievous lack of charity. Not so much. The spilling of the seed is almost kind of secondary. That is the manifestation of his sin. There's a reason why he doesn't, want to do that. It's because he doesn't want to be saddled with the responsibility. Okay, and again, this is in the case of his brother, who has no issue whatsoever. So there is that. Excuse me. There has there was likewise the understanding sexual intercourse for simply for the sake of pleasure, so that no children can ever be a possibility, was a deliberately evil thing. That a demon like a succubus could come and inflict on someone. This is why rabbis in the 2nd century said, men, don't sleep in your house alone, because a succubus could come to you. And it's just like, wow, you don't have any self-control. This is why you shouldn't sleep in your house alone. It's like, okay, the procreation of children and the rearing of children is incredibly important, within the Blessed Order. It is incredibly important. I did say earlier that that with the coming of Christ, that the purpose behind marriage is shifted somewhat. Whereas before, the purpose of marriage is procreation of children. The purpose now really is union with Christ. Union with Christ and becoming like Christ. This is the primary purpose for marriage. The procreation of children, a couple needs to be open to this. This is something that a married couple needs to understand as being a necessary part of this, but childbearing is no longer the primary goal. It's no longer the primary goal. So much so that we see in the commentary of St. John Chrysostom, St. John Chrysostom's wisdom is so profound. His knowledge of the scriptures is unparalleled, and he's preaching on this topic, and he says, the Lord said, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. He said, but the world is pretty well populated, so you don't have to worry about that part of it so much. That is, he was saying the married couple still needed to have sex, but don't be as concerned about producing children. I was like, oh, okay. Because again, the primary purpose of marriage is union with Christ, becoming like Christ, and that marriage, has the ability, to teach us and shape us in this manner, on account of just the need to continuously submit one's will to the will of God, continuously, for, the man and the woman to both be loving and submitting to each other, All right. We're a little bit beyond our hour here, but questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, because we know that sex is an important drive early on. But
right.
How do we overcome it? Because we have to build a relationship that in the older age, you have a stronger relationship than in the beginning without sex.
Yeah.
And how, because, we know that human relationship actually should be very strong in the absence of sex, actually. Right? It's, and as a couple, Are there certain steps that they should do, like in order to reach actually an old age in which they can be?
I wouldn't be overly concerned about that. You know, there's no need to try to, you know, douse the flame. You know, when it goes out, it just goes out. You know, and that's fine. You know, don't need to be working on suppressing that. You know, you know, that's you know, that's not necessary. You know, it's important to remember that, you know, Abraham sires Isaac in Sarah's very old age. Okay, you know, and that you know, John the Baptist, you know, is born with both of his parents being of old age, being like, you know, their late 60s, early 70s.
So miracles can still happen.
Yeah, so it can still happen. It's and again, seriously, it's you know, just because you know, well, you know, there's no longer the possibility of children, you know, well, you know, Zechariah and Elizabeth are still doing something, you know, even in their old age. It might not be as frequently as when they were young, you know, but it's still there, you know, and if it's still there, well, praise God, you know. By means of that, we got John the Baptist. I'm just saying, you know, so it's something to consider.
I have a neighbor in Romania, she has 6 kids, and I think the youngest was born when she was 49. All natural.
Mm-hmm. It's quite all right. It's quite all right. Quite all right. Don't let anyone tell you you're too old to be a parent. You know, I mean, you might, even if you're really old. You know, I'm looking at you.
I think my grandfather was signed into his 60s.
Yeah. There you go. You're never too old. So I'm just saying, you know. Yeah. Don't be in a rush to be done with that. You know, sex is a good thing. You know, and you know, it's, you know, you have it in its proper context. You know, you've heard the saying, you know, fire for the hearth, you know, sex for the marriage bed. You know, there's a great deal of wisdom in that saying. You know, fire is something that is both necessary and dangerous. You know, we need it to cook our food. We need it to stay warm. Okay, you know, we absolutely have to have it. Okay, but we have to control it. We have to keep it in its proper context. We have to keep it in the hearth. You know, we have to keep it there. If we let it burn elsewhere, it will destroy everything.